Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode of Communications and Cigars. I'm your host, John Crook. It is a balmy Monday night here. Monday night's episode, what are we here? I even got to check here. Monday, June 13th. My goodness, Monday, June 13th already. It's actually kind of pretty amazing how much it's there. Wow, it's hard to believe June here, and here we are. We are back. We are actually live tonight, so welcome. Good evening, everybody that is joining us. We did get a little bit of a late notification out for posting the show. I do apologize about that. The reason is because I had a couple things I've been doing today with this, and it kind of comes into what tonight's episode is about, which is the EMComm Chat podcast, which we'll be releasing, as well as we're going to talk about getting licensed, okay? And we're not just talking about like amateur. We're not. We're talking about everything across the board. And I wanted to bring that up because I've had people that have written me or in the past, and I'm actually kind of on the business side of things, doing some licensing myself. And I thought, man, you know what? I'll tell you what, this licensing thing can be a pain in the butt, and some people don't know that or know how to do it. So with that being said, yeah, here we are for tonight. So first of all, before we get going, I want to go ahead and thank for the people that are already appearing and watching us tonight here. Evan, good evening. The Ape, good evening. How are you doing? Fourth and Birch, Scout 75, Lon, and Phil is out there. Oh, as well as Liberty Cave is in here tonight too. So good evening to everyone on there. I also want to give a special shout out to Future Ham and Radio Girl. That's right, Future Ham and Radio Girl. If you girls are watching tonight here, special shout out to you two on there. Future Ham is obviously she's wanting to get into the amateur radio world, and Radio Girl, well, let me tell you something with Radio Girl. She's kind of wanting to get into that too on there, and the best part about it is they just don't want to do amateur. They want to do amateur, but they want to get into all aspects of radio. And that's kind of why tonight's episode is the way that it is. So the EMComm Chat podcast we're going to talk about, we're launching, as well as talking about getting a frequency coordination. So that's kind of the big thing, or getting licensed is a better way to put it on there. So a couple of people asked, they said, hey, John, how's things been going? Hey, I think a couple of last few episodes have been recorded. Yeah, it has been. We were able to do tonight. We got probably a recording tomorrow, next week on there too. Every once in a while, we have a couple recordings come up here, but that's okay. But hey, I got a really, really cool episode we're doing, and it's going to fit in well for the recording episode. And the reason I want to say that is because we are going to be talking about tornado alerts. And I don't have my box here with it, but it's a really cool, unique device. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking with the focus of saying there's a lot more ways to be notified by the National Weather Service than just watching TV or getting on your phones. And let's face it, if we're in this whole thing here and stuff like that on there, you know, kind of comes into one of those things where it's like, we're communicating. We should be able to listen to weather. We should be able to do this. We should be able to do this. So you know what? Keep that in the back of your mind for the upcoming episodes on there. Another thing I want to go ahead and give a shout out to, it. See, she is in the chat here tonight, is Fourth and Birch. Thank you very much, Fourth and Birch, for joining us. Fourth and Birch has been the one that has been kind enough and nice enough to do some of our, I don't want to call it swag. I don't want to call it merch. I don't even know what I want to call it, but some of our great things. So the Porta Potties on the Air shirt, as well as our Communication Cigar shirt. There have been a few people that have expressed some interest in buying them, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at coming up here pretty soon on how we can maybe for those that want to get merch, could get merch. Alrighty. But you know what? I think if we do something along the lines of merch, I think I want to do it for a cause or a good cause. So that's, I think, what's holding me up a little bit. So not to worry on there. That's what we got going on. So before we do that, we want to go ahead and thank our sponsor, JJK Communications. JJK Communications does provide, as I got all these cables here and stuff in my horrible horrible shack here, of wires and things that are disarrayed on there. But I want to say thank you to JJK Communications. They are the ones that help provide us with some of the equipment and stuff like that on there to be able to bring new equipment, to bring what kind of we're talking about here tonight a little bit with the EMComm Chat podcast. But before we dive into the context of our shows, it's communications and cigars. So we're going to talk about communications. Let's go ahead and talk about cigars. Now, one of the things that kind of has been brought up to my attention and asked a lot of the times is that, John, how do you feel about Cuban cigars? And I'll tell you, I've never had a Cuban cigar. But what happened with the Cuban? Why don't we have Cuban cigars? Well, that goes back to really kind of a skirmish that happened with our country and as well as Cuba during the whole time of the Cuban Missile Crisis and everything like that on there. But I guess tonight's cigar part is actually, I'm going to talk about a personal kind of favorite of mine. And while I've never tried a Cuban cigar, I'll be honest with you, I've heard a lot of people tell me, those that have said a Dominican cigar is a lot nicer, more sweet, more everything across the board. Now, if you know me, if you follow me on Facebook, John Crook, John space Kruk. No, I'm not the baseball player. I am better looking and have more attributes than he does. Wink, wink. But what I did was, as I posted it, I was lucky enough through what I talked about in my last episode, my good friend, he was able to give me, and I finally had my first, like, as authentic as you can get, straight from the source, Dominican A. Fuentes 8-5-8. Oh my God, was that a beautiful, delicious cigar. It paired right with a nice wine on there too that I was able to have, that was suggested to me on there. Absolutely amazing on there. So that's what I say. Hey, and it kind of goes into the saying, when you want a cigar and you want a good wine, you might have to actually try a couple wines with the cigar. Cigars are sort of like chocolate in a way when it comes to wine. And the reason I say it that way is because I've had cigars where I've had a nice adult beverage, or depending on if you had a festival like we did in our town, an adult liquid comedy beverage. It's really kind of one of those deals where it's like, hey, it really can bring out the flavor. So yes, I see Andy in there. Yes, it was a red wine, and I'm not even sure which one it was. My wife won it at the town festival. She won that in a charcuterie board. No, I am not going to go ahead and take it and mount my radios to it, so everybody's okay on there. I think she's going to be happy about it on there too. But it was a very nice, sweet red wine that paired greatly with it. So if you are thinking about having a cigar, and even a mixed drink of some sort on there, you're going to have to actually kind of, how do I say, like really kind of pair it out correctly on there. And then yes, as Abe said, good evening, Abe. There actually are getting many flavors of cigars that I'm going to tell you. I like my bourbon cigar, obviously, Macanudos, which I've talked about before. I like my coffee cigar, my Macanudo M series. Well, no, the M series is the bourbon. I forgot what the coffee one is called, but they're all Macanudos. But nevertheless, that's what the cigar is. You just got to try it. It's just really sit down and try it on there. So let me go to an email too. If you want to go ahead and talk to us about ideas for upcoming shows, anything around that you want to do, go ahead and hit us up. Communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. That's a way to reach the show here. Once again, JJK Communications sponsors us. That's why they let us have the email on there also too. So now, the big announcement. That's right. We are branching out into the podcast realm. And our new podcast is going to be called EMComm Chat Podcast. It's on Podbean. And you will be dropping episodes pretty quickly here if you want to. And we'll go ahead and actually put that web address actually in the message box here and stuff like that. EMCommChat.podbean.com. So once again, https://emcommchat.podbean.com. We kind of mentioned it before that we're going to be branching out into the podcast world. EMComm Chat is going to be a little bit more, how do I say, like a little bit more geared towards the public safety side and more so about emergency communications, and not necessarily just about amateur emergency communications, but we're going to have some other topics on there. But I've had a few people that have talked to me for a while, and they said, you know what, John, here's the deal. you have a great show. I like your show. I'd love to tune it into your show if I could and stuff like that. But guess what the problem is? I cannot do it on Monday nights, so I have to listen about it. And it would be more great if you could have different content and stuff like that on there and blah, 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 blah. So I kind of started thinking, I said, you know what? How can we do this? Well, podcasting is going to be the way. The episodes will be on there. We are even going to try to attempt. We'll see. We'll have to get the producers behind here, the scenes here, to see if we can really go ahead and even try doing a live stream. That's going to take some computers. That's going to take a couple things on there to kind of get going on there. It's going to be a slow growth, but we'll be dropping some episodes. You could listen on Podbean directly. Podbean does have an app. If you want to, we are going to be branching out to the Apple Podcast and Stitcher and Google and all those other ones and stuff like that. But there is such a lengthy authorization process. You have to produce a podcast, upload it to Podbean or do it through Podbean, and then it goes out to all the other places, and then they actually listen to it, and then they monitor it, and then if it meets, their code of conduct, all that kind of stuff like that on there, then you're good to go. Really, in essence, you're good to go, and then they'll let you go ahead and upload streams and all that stuff on there. So right now, Podbean, but in the future, we're going to be able to go ahead and have that so you can listen to it on all your favorite things. However, with this live streaming that we're going to be looking at doing on the podcast, okay, so on Podbean, there's a way to do live streaming, which we're planning on doing. That is only going to be through the Podbean app, but that actually is going to probably be even a little bit better, largely based on the fact that it is going to go and allow you to actually interact. So even if you're not on YouTube, like YouTube, if you subscribe to the channel here right now, you can actually chat in the comment section and everything like that. But now it's going to allow people that saying, hey, wait a minute, John, I am not on YouTube. How can I, like all those kind of things like this and this and this and this, how can I comment? How can I be part of the conversation if it's live stream is really what it is. And that's where Podbean is going to go ahead and do that. So, alrighty. So that is that cool part about the EMComm chat podcast. Like I said, I'm really stoked. I'm really excited. I guess it kind of comes from my radio days where I really kind of liked radio, and it was a lot that I did with radio, and I was actually like a DJ. I actually spun records. Yep, I had turntables, I had records, and you had to kind of back it up and get it there and stop and back it up there, and hit your cues and hit your intros and all that. And yeah, that was kind of the fun thing about it. And I think podcast is going to be able to do that because we're going to have there. In addition, we're going to be pulling in some interviews. That was another reason why we decided to do the podcast. We've had a few people that have said, I'd like to do an interview, but they don't want to come on the show. They don't want to be on camera, which is fine. I joke around and said I have a face for radio, and that's why I worked on radio way back in the day. And then I say I have a voice for newsprint. But I guess the minimum level we can go is actually down to the podcast. So that's why we're going to do it. So great things to come. Great things to come. All right, let's talk about licensing. One of the great things, and one of the episodes I've had a lot of people comment to me on. I don't know. I don't know if it's the number one episode of my channel or it's got to be at least in the top 5, maybe number 2, was what radio service is right for you. And we kind of talked a little bit about the different options on there. In addition, we also went and we've talked a little bit about the EFCR Title 47, Part 95, Part 97, Part 90, all those kind of things like that. And as I said, I'm doing some licensing for some commercial stuff. So I do dabble in the commercial world of things, having my own systems as well as this and a couple different things. And I needed to do some frequency updating and stuff like that. And what I did was I sat back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to buy some frequencies. Well, here's the thing. The FCC likes this. But as I started to dig into it for Part 90 licenses of an LMR nature, so land mobile radio. LMR, I guess this is a good time to kind of do something. So LMR and SMR. LMR stands for land mobile radio. Some people call it business radio. And then there was also SMR, which is specialized mobile radio. And that's usually, back in the days, that term was usually, and I say usually, referred to or referenced to like 800 megahertz trunked systems or specialized mobile radio, specialized trunk systems on there. Since then, that kind of term has kind of gone away. It's kind of changed a little bit, but there isn't coming back of 800 megahertz radio systems. So it's pretty cool what's going on there. So that's another good reason why to tune into the podcast, where we can focus on those topics a little bit more. But what I kind of noticed is that, man, there's licenses that you pay money for. There's licenses you take tests for and now have to pay money. And then there's license by usage. And we talked about that in that parts of the Title 47 one, the EFCR one, and everything like that. But I figured, you know what, now's a good time to kind of refresh, because since that episode came out, things have changed. And mainly the things that have changed is basically fees and a few other things. So I figured let's start and let's talk about all of them on there. And I think the first group we should talk about is where most people want to reside, which is the license by use, which basically means free money, no money whatsoever. You don't have to do that. So these are going to be your stuff, such as like CB radios. You don't have to buy a license to be on a CB radio. You buy a CB radio. When you buy that CB radio, it's licensed and set up to be basically licensed by use. And that's what I mean is that you buy that radio, and by buying that radio, that CB transmitter, you are automatically, unknowingly agreeing to adhere to the laws of radio operation. So no swearing, no cussing, no playing, no music. Basically everything in Title 47 and the parts of that radio that you're there. What I mean by parts is like, okay, amateurs part 97, GMRS, usually personal use radios fall into part 95, and then business, LMR, SMR, and then public safety fall into part 90 radios. Now, that's more so a certification radio. I understand that, okay? I do understand that, but they also kind of dictate what you can and can't do with the radio. So, like, if you go to part 95, you're going to see, and like if you look under the sections, and I forgot, it was like a subpart D maybe is for GMRS radios, it goes ahead and says there that you can only do these transmissions, power levels, blah, 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 right? Okay. So that's kind of where you're automatically looped into it. So going back to CB. CB radio falls under part 95 on there. Basically, you're not supposed to use it as one-way transmissions, except in these cases, and then you're not supposed to do this and this and this. But basically saying, hey, you're buying a CB radio, you are automatically agreeing to this. So if you violate the rules and the three-letter acronyms that show up in the dark SUVs and sunglasses and little ear squibs hanging out of their ears and, you know, come up and go, Mr. Anderson. So if everybody got that reference, good for you. But what happens is that those people, they catch you doing stuff wrong, and you did it, you're done. You screwed up because you unknowingly agree. Same thing with FRS radios. FRS radios are licensed by use, meaning, and I'm talking the FRS radios, I'm talking the Bubble Pack Walmart Special that only has 2 watts, but magically it can go 46 miles with no problem whatsoever. So that's what I'm talking about FRS. I'm not talking about a GMRS license. We're going to get that in a minute, okay? But FRS radios and MERS radios technically fall into that category also. So once again, these are radios you buy, hey, it meets certain requirements. Lots of these requirements are dictated once again to the radios. Like FRS radio, if you buy a true FRS radio, no license whatsoever, you got 2 watts or you got a half watt, the antenna needs to be fixed. It can only operate on these channelized frequencies on there. It can't have a keypad. It can't do stuff to manipulate it, blah, 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 all those things. Same thing with MERS radios. Walmart, if you go ahead, Walmart, yeah, I called you out, Walmart. They're using a MERS frequency, but at one time it was not a MERS frequency. It was actually a licensed frequency that they used, but it became a MERS frequency. But technically, they need to use, if they're going to not use a licensed radio, okay, they're restricted to 2 watts. And then if you notice, you see their Motorola radios, they kind of carry around those like business radios, but the antennas are fixed, the radio's fixed. It has only a certain amount of channels that can only transmit on 2 watts or less. That's what MERS requires on there. So those are, once again, licensed by use. You buy them, you charge them up, you slap the double A's in there, you go from there and blah, 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 blah. Okay, those are licensed by use. Oh, I'm sorry. Marine is actually licensed by use also, Part 80. I'm sorry, I forgot the Marine users on there. Sorry. So what happened in that case was Marine is the same thing. Marine, you do not have to go ahead and get a license. You don't if you're buying a Marine radio, but there are Marine permits. There is classes and basically tests you can take if you want to work on Marine radios and stuff like that and da-da-da. It's a separate episode. But no, you can walk into Cabela's, you can walk into Shields, any local fishing store that happens to sell radios, Uniden, Yaesu, EMComm, who else is selling radio? Midland, all those. You just buy the Marine radios off there and you go on and operate. However, once again, Marine radios, okay, have certain requirements on there, and they even go one step further. And that they go ahead and have certain restrictions and usages for channels. So even though Marine radios have all these channels in there, like 99 channels in there or whatever, they are restricted for who you can and can't use. Okay, channel 16, just like channel 9 on CB, channel 16 on Marine, you can't go on there and have a call. That's the distress calling channel, okay, Marine channel 16. Once again, certain rules on there. Why am I stressing the certain rules part? Is because just think that because you buy a bubble pack radio for or buy a CB, or you buy a MERS radio, or an FRS radio, or Marine radio and stuff like that, doesn't mean that it's like, hey, I could do whatever the hell I want with these radios. No, it does not at all. As a matter of fact, and this really kind of, you know what, I'm not going to say this because that comes into the later part of the show, and everybody knows what I'm talking about there. Okay, so with that being said, you got to learn those rules. Take the time to be a good radio operator and learn the rules. Alrighty? Learn the rules. Now, the next license class I'm going to talk about is Part 95, which is amateur radio. And a big thing happened to amateur radio, which was for the first time really ever in the history of amateur radio, or at a significant amount, I should say. Amateur radio now is charging a fee, $35 fee, for you to get your license. Now, this isn't like the other ones where you pay a fee and then you get your license and you're good to go. No, you have to pay a fee and you still have to take the test. So yes, you have to sit, do a test. People are doing it online. You can do a computer down. Stop. Let me clarify because everybody's going to have a fit. All right. You can go to testing sessions now that will actually have a tablet where you can do your test in an electronic fashion on there. All right. You're proctored, meaning people are watching you take it, but you're still doing it on the tablet. Then what ends up happening is that there were some people that go ahead and have a situation where they were doing it online. And I never like to really per se inject opinions. It was kind of an interesting thing, and it was done because of COVID. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I haven't heard a great report or a white paper or a synopsis of it. I really haven't. I've heard comments and I've heard opinions, but I haven't been able to find any sort of clinical data, as I like to say, which says, you know what, this online testing was good and we had good success with the low or no cheating rate. I did hear people say, quote unquote, that, hey, this person cheated on the test. I don't know. I've taken online tests for my college education. I've done online tests for numerous other things like that on there. And they have to have me turn my laptop around and all this kind of stuff like that and blah, 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 blah. So I really don't know how the procedure went. I haven't taken the test. If it worked, great. Hey, that's great. If it can keep people honest, then that's great. But yeah, you have to take a test and then you have to have a fee. Okay. So little fee on there happens. It is what it is. You pay your fee, $35, you get your license for 10 years and you're good to go. So that's amateur radio. That's kind of in this own quagmire of its kind of itself, like kind of way out here. You know, license by use, we're right here. I'll say we're right here. Amateur, we're kind of all the way over here, like in, let me put it out here, left field, way over here, right here, okay? Anyways, that's that. Now we move on to strictly fee-based radio services, getting your license in this case. Now I'm going to start out the most popular one, which is making an amazing growth right now, and that is GMRS. And I don't know if it's GMRS is because it's become popular, or it's a lower fee, or what on there. I don't really know. But GMR license was at $70, was good for 10 years, and it covered pretty much your immediate family. So everybody that's one generation around you is the best way I could describe it without getting into the da-da-da-da-da-da. So basically, I have a GMRS license. My dad can use it. My mom can use it. Okay? My wife obviously can use it. My kids can obviously use it. My brother could use it. My sister could use it. Anybody that's one leg out from you. Alrighty? That's who could do it. Now, could technically my neighbor down the street go ahead and use my GMRS license? No. Alrighty? And that I think has a little bit to do. If you look at the history of GMRS, it was kind of a business sort of usage way back in the day, but that's now changed. It's more, I don't know. I will tell you this: GMRS used to be in my book like this. Hey, it's a traveler's kind of thing. It's better than CB. You have repeaters, you have better communication, this kind of thing, like this and this and this and this and this. But I'll tell you, I've actually seen this almost like paradigm shift, if you want to say, from how amateur radio repeaters were like in the mid to late 90s. That's now happening on GMRS, and amateur has it there. But I'm gonna okay. That's opinion, that's comment, that's another episode. But anyway, GMRS, you pay your $35, you go online. I will tell you, hands down, getting a GMRS license right now is the cheapest and the easiest to go ahead and do for communications. Now, once again, these are family communications, not really business communications. If you're a business, you can't be running out really and, hey, here's my $35. Give me my GMRS license. You're restricted to certain frequencies, basically UHF band and certain FRS frequencies, which are kind of the interstitial channels, which you can run higher watts on there. You can put up repeaters, but there's all these certain restrictions on there. So GMRS is still kind of like that alternative that a lot of people are doing. I have a GMRS license. My kids use it if they need to. My wife uses it, and we really haven't per se used it too much, but it is a great resource. It's a great tool to have in the back of your pocket. So that is GMRS license. Now, we're going to talk about the last two radio services, which happen to share the same part of the Title 47, which is business or LMR or SMR, depending, and public safety. Let's do public safety because odds are anybody who's watching my show is not going to really be doing probably any public safety licensing. That's going to be done by one single person in your department probably. Or if they have a radio vendor, sometimes that will do that. But basically, they go through APCO, okay? The Association of Professional Communication Officers. That's what APCO stands for. And APCO is an organization, P25, actually is short for APCO 25, because they came out with standard APCO standard 25, which talks about how a digital voice format using C4FM and FDMA technology is designed to be a standard for public safety, a CAI, Common Area Interface, okay? In addition to that, they also work with going ahead and helping process your license. So when you are public safety and you want to go and get a new frequency, so if you want to get a new TAC channel, or you need a frequency for a repeater, or you're putting up a trunk system and you need frequencies, whatever, you're going to be contacting APCO. APCO is going to be making sure your application has all the I's dotted and T's crossed and everything. And then what they're going to go ahead and do is they're going to help you get it to the state frequency coordinator. Yes, there is a frequency coordinator per every state. And for the most part, most state frequency coordinators do good. Once again, I'm going to stop it right there because I have some opinions, but I'm not going to give them here. But then they take a look, and they're the ones that are the keeper, the holy grail keeper of all these frequencies. That go ahead and saying, yes, you can use this frequency. Or, oh, hey, Acme Ambulance Service, you need a new TAC channel and you want a VHF channel. Well, let's look at the VHF channels in the area. Now, of course, with spectrum becoming crowded and stuff like that, their job has become a little bit more laborious in nature because they have to go and make sure that everybody can kind of have a slice of the pie. And they need to make sure that you are not going to interfere with your frequency to someone else's frequency, or what we call co-channel or same channel, meaning, hey, the frequency I'm using here is only simplex, but let's say 40 miles to the south of me, they're using that same frequency as repeated. Well, we have to play nicely in the sandbox. So that's where all that comes in and blah, 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 blah. Now, the reason I say that is because it's sort of like, to a degree, a coordination process for like an amateur repeater. Because the APCO goes ahead, once again, make sure everything does. Here's what you want to look. Here's what it is. They go over the application with you. It's very nice. I've done a couple of public safety licensings before. And then once again, they send it to the state frequency coordinator. And then what you do is you got to wait and you got to wait and you got to wait. You got to wait usually until they can do that. Because then if we're going to be using a frequency that, as it's plotted, is going to come into contact with someone else using that frequency, there has to be a letter of concurrence. A letter of concurrence is going to say, hi, how are you? We're Acme Ambulance. We're looking for a new frequency to use. And per the state frequency coordinator, you are already using this frequency, or where we might use this frequency could interfere with your frequency usage. Do you have a problem with that? So the public safety agency that would be using that frequency could go ahead and get this letter and says, you know what? I guess we're not going to have an issue with it. Or they could easily turn around and says, you know what? Nope, you're not going to do it. It's going to interfere too much. We've had a problem. So actually, then the ball goes into that person's court there, and they have the right to either say yes or no. And if they say yes, you sign a letter saying, yes, we'll allow them to use their frequency based on the certain parameters that would be suggested to them. And then that goes back to the licensee. And then that goes back to the state frequency coordinator. Once the state frequency coordinator has all that done, then he can contact APCO. Then the FCC gets involved, of course, because they have to do that. And then the next thing you know is, boom, you're done. Now, here's the interesting part about public safety frequencies with the FCC. You do not have to really file any sort of FCC fees if you're a public safety entity and you meet the definition of public safety entity on your FCC license. You do have to pay a fee to APCO because APCO does the frequency coordination along with the state frequency coordinator. But when you renew your frequency as a public safety agency, you just click renewal when it comes time and it's good. You don't have to pay any fees. You don't have to do anything like that whatsoever. You just have to pay for that initial fee. Now, they do a little bit different charging than what business frequencies do. So there's a fee involved per frequency, per whether it's repeated, all these kind of things like that in there. And those fees, once again, are a little different, slightly structured than you say a person or a department that's like a business agency or something like that on there. So that's how public safety does it. It's not instant. You know, I've had people that have actually said, you know, oh, when public safeties need frequencies, they just say, oh, we're going to take that frequency and we're going to use it and we're going to be good. Oh, wrong. You don't. It's not that way. They have to go through a process also. Because when you take a look at the certain bands that are out there, if you look at VHF, you look at UHF out there, you do have certain segments. Now, VHF is a little more of a hot mess than UHF because UHF is usually standard 5 megs. They were smart when UHF came. I don't know who said that. Everything's going to be 5 megs, except when you get to the real lower portions of the UHF and the upper portions. So, like, when you're like the low 400s, mid 400s, like a lot of the government band stuff, and then you get up above 470 where you're getting back up in the more government bands and stuff, sometimes that 5 meg goes out the window and it's usually maybe 3 meg or something like that on there. But really, for the most part, everything is 5 meg. Okay? But public safety for VHF, like I said, hot mess. I've seen repeaters that their frequencies are like interlaced here with business frequencies. Same thing happened with 800. It's like 800 had public safety and business and public safety and business and Nextel and business and public safety, and it was all over the place, really. And then they did that big rebanding, refarming thing of 800. And now things are getting better. That's going to be there. Once again, another episode, maybe that's going to be on the podcast there. But the public safety just doesn't get to pick it. They actually have to go through the same process also. All right, let's talk about the last service. And this is going to be business LMR, SMR. They have to go through a frequency coordination process also. All righty. And it's a little different because with business frequencies, you can get mobile frequencies only. You can get base frequencies to mobile. So for an example, maybe you have a frequency that's only used by mobiles. It can't be fixed at one point. You can't put it on a base radio on an antenna on the top of your business. There are frequencies that do that are basically fixed frequencies where, hey, I have an antenna on the top of my business and I'm going to talk out on, let's say, a simplex channel to my workers in the field or those kind of things like that. And then, of course, you have repeaters, and then you have repeater systems, which usually kind of go into either like trunked radio systems of some sort. And that's where you get into that SMR, special mobile radios or specialized mobile radio versus LMR on there. So that's what it is. Now, this is the process that I'm in. Now, this process is quite a process because there are certain frequency coordinators that can only coordinate certain frequency ranges. And usually what ends up happening is it's the one, like there's a lot of them that are below 800 megahertz. So like they're in the UHF band, the VHF band, the low band. There's still a few low band frequencies out there. More so like the 30s megahertz, the 40 megahertz range, those kind of things like that. And then you jump up into the VHF band, which is like 136 to 160-ish, let's go ahead and say. On there, and then you have the VHF, where the UHF for business, which can range from 450 to 470 on there. Those are kind of a lot of the main frequency coordinators. There are a few that are specialized that can do 800 megahertz, and 800 megahertz, once again, is this newer beast coming back to life. And the reason being is that there are bands that are opening up after they did all the rebanding and said, okay, here, instead of doing this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take all public safety. We're going to put it on this portion of the band, and they're going to put all like cell phones in this port of the band. And then we're going to add another section here for the business band, for cellular, all that kind of stuff like that on there. So that's kind of what has kind of happened with 800. But what happens is you contact the frequency coordinator. The frequency coordinator is going to go ahead and say, okay, I need some information from you. And you're going to say, what do you need? Well, they're going to go ahead and tell you, hey, I want to operate two-way radios, whether it be for business purposes, for specialized needs, those kind of things like that. There are some requirements on there, okay? You really just can't be like, I want to talk to my family on my own private, secure, encrypted channel, and digital encrypted format on top of that. So I'm going to contact the frequency coordinator, and frequency coordinator is going to go ahead and blah, 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 blah. No, you really got to be for the business band. You got to do business stuff. And if you want family communications, they're going to tell you there's GMRS, there's FRS, there's even amateur, there's all these other things. You don't need your own frequency. But if you do meet some requirements that, hey, you're a business or you are selling a communication service like repeater time and something like that or whatever, then yes, you can come to the business person. And they're going to ask you, is this a mobile, an MO class? Is this an FX1, usually in a fixed operation class? Or is this going to go ahead and be a repeater, which is usually like FX2 or FX6 or FX4, a couple of the different things on a license you may see on there. And they're going to determine, okay, you operate from a specific point. So they're going to say, give me a control point. Put a dot in the map and tell me how far around this dot you're going to talk. And they're going to tell you, hey, here's the deal. We only want you to talk, like, okay, let's say I cover only the city of the village where I live in. And it's about, I only need to be from the center dot of the building. I need to be talking about 10 miles around. So 10 miles out either direction. Okay, so then they'll go ahead and convert it to kilometers, and they'll say, you need to talk X amount of kilometers from that one specific point. Now, that could be the fixed station. Mobile operation, they'll say, hey, once again, this fixed point, how far are you going to travel with your radios around there? And there are some licenses that are 90 kilometers in distance from your control point, meaning you can operate that radio frequency within the parameters you have set up, which license class, emission type, emission amount, blah, 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 in this range, in this area. You get out of that area, then it's like you're illegal. So here I am talking on my radio. I'm in my license. I take 2 feet out of that range. Technically, I'm supposed to stop talking. Now, with that, there are frequencies, those are usually called itinerants, which can be used nationwide, statewide, lot larger of an area. But when you're doing these licensing, what's going to end up happening is, like I said, you're putting a dot in the map, and they're going to ask you, are you using mobiles only, handhelds and portables all around? You're always moving around. Or are you going to be putting it there, and you're going to be putting a fixed base station, or you're going to be putting a repeater. Now, the location of the repeater doesn't have to be the control point. It does not. But the control point is going to be that marker for the mobile or that base operation on there. So what happens in that case is you have to contact a frequency coordinator. And these frequency coordinators can charge you anything they really want. You kind of got to do your research. You got to call them and saying, okay, how much are you going to charge me if I just want some mobile frequencies? If I want 3 frequencies to talk on my 50-watt mobiles. And they'll go ahead and they'll be like, okay, we charge this much. Well, how much do you charge for a repeater? Well, we charge this much. And some frequency coordination groups will charge a frequency per repeater frequency. So meaning repeater has to have 2 frequencies, right? Well, they're going to charge you for the input frequency and the output frequency. And they do this for various reasons and stuff like that on there. But they're going to ask you for all this information. You have to provide all this information. And when you provide all that information to you, they basically are going to say, okay, you have to pay us for the frequency-free work we did for you, finding the frequency, doing this, da-da-da-da-da. And then, guess what? You need to give Uncle Sam some money. So once you pay the frequency coordinator for the application fees and the doing their work, and then the FCC fees, they send it to the they send it to the FCC with the fees that the FCC needs. And now you sit back and you twiddle your thumbs and you look at your new radios that you have, and you're like, Sometimes they'll tell you the frequency before your license is issued because they'll let you know, hey, this is a frequency you're going to use, but you can't use it legally yet. You don't have a license. And then what you do is you sit and you wait, and that radio's getting prettier and prettier. And then you're like, the hell with it. No, I can't. I'm not legal. And then magically, there it is. You get notification from the FCC in your email that your license has been issued. You have your call sign, and there's all that little pretty things. And then you say, hey, I have my license here, and now I have my radio here. Let me go out and talk and do what I want to go ahead and do. Now, sometimes these coordinators are direct coordinators. So like for me, I go directly to a coordinator. I don't use a radio service. Some people have a radio service provider. Sorry, just in the comments, go chunk your own repeater. Yes, Scout, that's what we all do. We just sit back. No, that's funny. But what it is, what happens is that there's numerous people that do that. Sometimes radio services have, like, I should say radio service, but radio vendors or two-way radio providers have people in their office that does this frequency coordination work, or sometimes the two-way radio provider will work or agreement with a certain frequency coordinator, and then they collect all the fees, and then they distribute the fees out for you on there. Numerous ways to do it, but much like frequency coordination of like an amateur world or something, yeah, there's a group of people that sit and go, yep. Okay, this and this and this and this. Okay, yep, we got the money for them. Let's send it to the FCC fee, and here's your fees, and then the FCC takes as long as it is, and then boom, it's done. Okay, that's what it is there. Now, one other thing, kind of part of the business LMR thing, is interesting because the business and LMR have. And I'm going to say, you guys are going to know, it's like the Motorola, like CLS radios or Kenwood Pro Talk radios, all those kind of things like that on there. They're business radios that they're assigned frequencies. So there's like 90 UHF business frequencies, and then there's like 27 VHF business frequencies. And what these are low power radios, usually like 2 to maybe 4 watts. And these are the ones you see on the hips of the people at your, Chili's, at your Outbacks, at your Best Buys, at your this and this and this, and your Quick Trips and stuff, at your gas station. Anytime someone needs a radio, they buy these business radios. Now, you're supposed to get licensed for them. And those are actually in certain blocks, VHF block and UHF blocks. And those are really easy because what you could do is you could tend to just fill out the license paperwork. Even in the radio, you open it up, it'll tell you the instruction where to go and fill these out. And you can purchase these blocks of little frequencies to be used. You really got to use a frequency coordinator when you want to go high power, when you want to put a base station in, where you want to put a repeater in. They're going to find out the rest of the pools out there. Excuse me. But otherwise, there's a lot of little different ones out there. I was working on a video about scanning some of these frequencies, and we got that in the hopper there. So we'll go ahead and do that from there. But that's the little difference on there. You still need to pay for the fee. You kind of have to get them coordinated, but they're sort of already pretty much coordinated for you. And that's what I wanted to do with the video too, is like go to Mall of America, take my scanner, and just at Mall of America, like you put it in a search on a certain frequency for CTCSS tone, and you'll be seeing like the CTCSS tone is just flipping between like 3 or 4 of them, because there's all this traffic on this one thing, because they decided, hey, channel 1 on this radio, the business radio is the one we're going to go ahead and use. So it's quite interesting with that kind of business kind of frequency stuff on there. So that's really kind of it for there. See in the comments, yeah, talking about lines and stuff like that. When we get near Canada, we tend to, and on the East Coast and the West Coast, there, we have, PAVE pause. It's the radar installation thing. So UHF gets really, really goofy there. And sometimes it's really, really hard to get a UHF frequency there, because there's a lot of restrictions. There's a lot of power restrictions, a lot of location restrictions. There's even some restrictions, for example, Boundary Waters Canoe Area. Boundary Water Canoe Area, yes, they're near Canada, but they even have certain restrictions on certain things on there. You don't really see cell phone towers in Boundary Waters area. You don't really see repeaters up there in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area there. And a lot of places have that. A lot of places try to do no radio zones, or maybe no band zones, meaning like you can't use a radio, you can't use this or this or this in those areas on there. So that's kind of what tonight's episode has been. But hey, it wouldn't be a normal episode if we didn't have, what really bends my antenna? You know what really bends my antenna? People that use radios illegally. You are dicks, okay? I'm going to tell you that here right now. Yes, you are a bunch of dicks. And I'm using that because I probably shouldn't use that word. It's probably nice, but I say my shows aren't for kids. And the reason I say that is because, you know what? We all need to play well in the sandbox. And the sandbox is RF energy that emits from our radios. Listen, folks. There are certain rules and there are certain regulations for certain purposes. Alrighty? There is. I don't care if you like them or not. People don't tend to like organizations of a government nature that have 3-letter acronyms. Okay, that's fine. I understand that. But there are certain rules and regulations that need to happen and take place. There's a reason it's done, contrary to popular belief. In the comments earlier, I heard one thing that, God, I hate it. I think, Scout, I think you put it out there. I hate it when you go up north and you're trying to use a marine band radio, and guess what? You hear bear hunters, you hear deer hunters on them. Why? Because, they bought a radio, and the marine radios can do higher power than FRS radios, and because it's outside, it's VHF, the propagation's better. Yeah, buy a radio, buy a license. For crying out loud, get an itinerant license. It's not that expensive. It's yours. Then you can run encrypted. Then you can run digital. Then you could do whatever the hell you want. But just get a license, okay? Same thing with people who are using GMRS. As GMRS is becoming more and more popular now, I see more and more people buying GMRS radios and then going ahead and saying, you know what? I don't need a license. I could just hop on there. No, it takes away the sanctity. It makes you think, why do people go ahead and lock down their GMRS repeaters and have such weird tone combinations of, hey, it's an inverted DCS going in and it's a PL tone coming out. Great, because they don't want these stupid idiots going ahead who are unlicensed and going and doing it. Amateur radio, Jesus, that's been the way for the longest time. I've heard people who have gone ahead and been purchased amateur radio, and I've seen people who have purchased amateur radios for the pure simple fact that they want some radios to use, and they don't care. They don't even modify them, not even like illegally modifying the radio. They just park on an amateur frequency and start talking. Buy a license. Do your duty. Do your job. Because for us that do use radios for business, for public safety even, for commercial, for whatever the case may be, for amateur, for fun, whatever, you know what? The radio spectrum's getting crowded. It's harder and harder to find frequencies. It is. And I'm talking about your own frequency too. There's tons of times where you can get frequencies, and I've driven just outside of my business frequency area there, or driven near my, even within it, and I get too close to, let's say, a commercial repeater, such as like a power company or another business channel or something, and I hear bleed over from that frequency coming onto my frequency also. But you know what? How hard is it? How hard is it to get a frequency? It's not. It's really not. But then you also get into the thing on there that, you know, hey, there's cheap radios coming in all the time. When people buy these cheap radios, they're going ahead and using it, and they're spinning the dial and turning whatever channel they want to use or whatever frequency they want to use. Yeah, it's hard. We have to police our own bands. And what really kind of also bends my antenna on this is that I do the right thing. I go ahead and I get my frequency coordination for my business channels. I get my frequency coordination for a amateur repeater. I follow the rules. And then you have someone who comes along and causes problems and havoc because they didn't want to follow by the rule. You know what? I guarantee you 10 to 1, the cost of your license is probably going to go ahead and be a lot less than what you're going to go ahead and have to spend on the amount of cheap Chinese radios that you're trying to get to work and illegally operate on different frequencies. So, there. More of a, you know what I want to rant about tonight than what really bends my antenna. So, thank you for everyone that tuned in tonight. Once again, keep an eye on the podcast on there. Once again, EMComm.podbean.com. So it's EMComm, EMCommChat.podbean. That's PODBEAN.com. Keep an eye to there. You're going to see some podcasts that are going to start to drop on there and have interviews and stuff like that. We're looking really great forward to it for the EMComm Chat podcast. Until then, I want everybody to stay safe. Hey, the weather's getting better, or it's getting hotter, depending on where you're at. Stay safe. Take some time for yourself. And if you got a cigar, sit back and enjoy it. Until then, everyone.